A Catholic Overview of the Bible video program, number 5. Our video story accompanying the scripture study opens in southeastern Judah in the valley of Elah at this site. Here we imagine the forces of the Philistines, always pressing Israel for more territory, encamped along the further hill. From here Goliath stood and shouted out his challenges to the fearful Israelite forces day after day. The two armies faced each other from these two hills, at the base of which is the stream where David selected stones for his sling. The slingshot had two cords, one wrapped around the wrist, the other was held in the hand. It was whirled around the head, and the one string released. It was an ancient and effective weapon in skilled hands, as Goliath never had a chance to realize. David composed psalms, many of which we have in our book of Psalms, which were sung to a lyre. David's music soothed Saul in times of depression. These deeply eroded limestone hills in the southern wilderness of Judah provided the hiding places where David and his men kept away from Saul, who was determined to find and kill him. The wilderness of Judah around En-Gedi was home to David during his years of flight. The ancient Hebrew word for this kind of terrain was Jeshimon, meaning desolation and wasteland. It was an effective refuge for those fleeing oppression, not only in David's day, but later too, when God's faithful were tormented by the Greeks at the time of the Maccabees. This map shows the area of the Judean wilderness where David lived during his flight from Saul. If En-Gedi on the Dead Sea, which is in the lower right-hand corner, is spotted, and it's that blue dot along the shore of the sea, then the other places will not be difficult to find. En-Gedi refreshed David and his men for a while because it is a fresh water spring. Abigail and Nabal lived in Maon and Carmel, west of En-Gedi, at the edge of the wilderness of Judah. There are two blue spots there as well. Two other sites associated with David are Adullam and Keilah, also in wilderness lands, and just west of the letter A in Judah. The last battles of Saul are mapped out on the upper insert, showing the midsection of the country with Mount Gilboa and Bethshan, the Philistine stronghold, where Saul's body was impaled and after their victory. And you'll see Bethshan is also a blue circle along the edge of the Jordan River. Heavy evaporation of the Dead Sea rarely makes possible a picture so haze-free as this. David's retreat included this side of the Dead Sea, particularly around the springs of En-Gedi, which we will see in the next picture. While tourists today still enjoy these fresh waters, we can imagine how this freshwater spring at En-Gedi, very near the Dead Sea, must have been a source of refreshment for David and his men. We saw on the little map just where Carmel was to the west of En-Gedi. It's on the edge of the wilderness in the territory of Carmel, where David's men depended on farmers for their sustenance and in turn helped them to guard their flocks. Most of the farmers in the area were careful to stay on David's good side. Though his men were probably ruffians, he was able to keep them under his control. However, Nabal had no inclination to feed David and his men. His gruff reply nearly cost him his life. Amongst this tumble of rocks is the cave of Adullam, and was one of David's strongholds, where Saul sought him out. Perhaps it was inside this cave of En-gedi that David spared Saul's life the first time by refusing to kill or threaten him, though he was unknowingly at his mercy. David recognized the difference between the human being and his anointed office. He would not touch the Lord's anointed, even though the human holding that anointed office was not worthy of it. The Dead Sea, near En-gedi, is a popular spot for swimmers who want to try swimming in the saltiest water on earth. It is possible to sit in the water with your hands over your head. Fun, but you badly want to wash that salt off your body afterward. We now move to the north, nearer to the Sea of Galilee. At the base of Mount Tabor, easy to pick out in the landscape of Israel because of its distinctive rounded shape, is the village of Endor. Saul consulted a medium who called up the ghost of Samuel, and she lived in Endor. Because God had no longer answered him through drawing Urim and Thummim, he resorted to this forbidden practice. In response, Samuel, arising from Sheol, told him that he, that night, would be with him in Sheol. The distinctive shape of the Hazor mountain can be seen in the distance. It has the distinction of being the place where the transfiguration of Jesus took place. The great fortress of Masada stood on top of this formidable rock. More famously used by Herod for a hideaway defense, it was also used by David during his years of exile. It is on the Dead Sea. This picture is oddly colored, but at night, for the tourist's admiration, the fortress of Masada is lighted artificially. We may recall the Mosque of Abraham at Hebron by earlier video programs, but here it is again. It was built by Herod the Great. It was the site of the tombs of the patriarchs and their wives. It was also at Hebron that David was crowned king by the elders of Judah after the death of Saul. This was a smooth political move to gain the support of this southern area and the important tribe of Judah. In our time, Hebron, also called Hebron, has been a focus of conflict between Jews and Arabs. An aerial view of modern Hebron and environs where David ruled for 7.5 years. A little right and below the center is that great mosque of Abraham. It was a site of special significance even in David's day because of its deep association with the patriarchs. Yet the building itself dates from the time of Jesus and the famous King Herod. The diagram at the right attempts to show you through an artist's sketch the depth of the pool of Gibeon. You see the stairway coming down past the first indentation and then down and down to the pool. It was at the pool of Gibeon. The picture on the left is a photo of the opening from the top. At this pool, the champions of David's army met those of Abner's. The pool is not then what we would consider a pool because it lies so far below the ground. and is only reached by that winding stair. Thinking about getting water regularly from such a depth makes one appreciate the kitchen tap. It was from this pool, here being explained by a guide, the drop-off is in the lower left. This is where Asahel followed Abner after the defeat of Saul's men and threatened to kill him. Abner then killed Asahel in self-defense along the road. Today, the old stairway is only barely discernible amidst the broken rubble. It also is a place where farmers dispose of dead sheep. Wheat is harvested near Gibeon in the ancient way. Gibeon was a city that fooled Joshua by pretending to be far, far away, and so saved themselves from his conquest. The contest between Saul's army and David's army took place, as we've said, at the pool of Gibeon nearby. A Bedouin tent sits near Gibeon at wheat harvest time. The nomadic life of freedom from all restraints is still appealing to that culture and goes on side by side in modern Israel. David was buried here in Jerusalem after his death. This city he had wrested from its defenders by sending men up the water channel. The tomb of David is on the same site as the upper room in Mount Zion in Jerusalem. The citadel, called David's Tower, in Jerusalem. We have seen this important site in earlier programs. The Temple Mount has been of importance to Israel from the time of Abraham, for here he offered Isaac as a sacrifice. Jerusalem today has the Muslims' Mosque of Omar standing on the Temple Mount. The present walls date from the Turks, about 1513 A.D., The Dome of the Rock, another name for this mosque, dates from 600 A.D. This spot was chosen by David, 1000 B.C., when the angel of the plague lifted the pestilence here. It was then the threshing floor of Araunah, from whom David bought it for 50 shekels of silver, to offer sacrifices for the lifting of the plague, and later to designate this site to build a temple for God. Situated on the eastern edge of Jerusalem, this site is a site of pilgrimage for many peoples, chiefly, of course, Muslims, but also Christians and Jews. The retaining wall for the mount is this immense piece of architecture that was laid during the time of Herod. Some of it may even go back to the time of Solomon. But here, devout Jews come to pray, for after all, it did hold the great and glorious temple. Looking down into the center of the interior of the Dome of the Rock, we see the original stone upon which the temple was built. It is the place that David purchased for the site that he would ask his son Solomon to build. It supposedly has the footprint of Muhammad while he was ascending to heaven. It's possible for Jews and Christians to enter the mosque if they obey the rules of removal of their shoes and the covering of any bare arms or legs. Across the Kidron Valley, to the east of the Temple Mount, there is the Mount of Olives, which David climbed, weeping, escaping Jerusalem at the time of Absalom's revolt. It is also the site of the Garden of Olives, where Jesus agonized before his arrest and crucifixion. The church in this picture commemorates Jesus taking all mankind's sins upon himself in the Garden of Olives. The olive trees are still there to the right of the building. Looking back west from the top of Mount Olives, today a traveler looks over a scene that would startle David, the modern city of Jerusalem. His city was only that of a small hill running south from the southern wall, called Mount Zion, or the City of David. This Arab on the camel is always there when you take a picture, and he expects some compensation. An artist helps us remember that David's reign will always be thought of as a golden time of plenty and prosperity. The time would be a foretaste of the glories of the time of the Messiah. Again, an artist depicts the rejoicing procession, bringing the ark to Jerusalem for the first time. David solidified his rule in north and south by capturing Jerusalem and making it his royal city, and bringing the ark to rest on what would be the Temple Mount. The ark had been in a home in Kiriath Jearim since the time of Samuel. David danced before the ark, clad only in a priest's apron, the ephod, and Michal, who had been forced to come back to David in another attempt to unite the country, despised him for the display of himself. This is the city of Jerusalem in an aerial view. The insert is important, for it shows in red lines the Temple Mount in David's time, and the yellow lines are the extent of the city of David. Excavations in the city of David have revealed the complex step construction that was built to support the Temple Mount and Solomon's great temple. Another aerial view, this time looking down on what is the modern city of David, where the ancient city of David was, looking up north to where the Temple Mount is. This foreground is that original city of David, and to the right you'll see what looks like a stream. That is the Kidron Valley that limited its growth to the west. Look closely and you will see boats with oarsmen towing bundles of logs. David stockpiled cedar from Lebanon for his public buildings, and Solomon contracted more cedars for the temple and his other public buildings. This is another view of that same picture. These famous cedar logs of Lebanon were floated down the Mediterranean to be used in Jerusalem. Not much exists today of those great forests so famous for the cedars of Lebanon. Both David and Solomon made arrangements with King Hiram of Tyre for this building material. Solomon had to sell several cities in exchange. Taken from the internet, the descendants of those marvelous forests of Lebanon are still magnificent trees. We hear in Scripture about the gold from Ophir. Here on a clay tablet is a record of the purchase of gold from Ophir. Solomon traded in gold. Ethiopia has an ancient tradition that establishes Ethiopia's kings as the true successors of the house of David. Haile Selassie claimed to be the successor of that line. With a communist takeover there, that line may have been lost. The 1955 revised Constitution of Ethiopia stated that the royal line descends without interruption from the dynasty of Menelik I, son of the Queen of Ethiopia, Queen of Sheba, and King Solomon of Jerusalem. In a sheepskin painting, an Ethiopian emissary sets out with gifts. He sails past the pyramids. The emissary meets Solomon. He is followed by the queen, who meets him, is astounded by his wisdom, is seduced by him, and they part. She claims the Ethiopian tradition is carrying his child, Menelik I. This map of Arabia from the National Geographic shows the territory probably ruled by the Queen of Sheba, which was North Yemen on the southwestern tip of Saudi Arabia, directly across from what we now name Ethiopia. So the Queen of Sheba may have been the ruler of this place. This is Sheba, or Saba, capital of Marib. The Sabaean race are great throughout Arabia, so wrote a Greek historian. On what is known as Frankincense Trail of North Yemen, which was the territory of the Queen of Sheba, camels are still the mode of travel. An Arabian mother and child of the territory of Sheba, the exaggerated eyebrows are to increase the baby's beauty. From a cemetery near Sheba comes this bust that dates from near the time of the Queen of Sheba. Is it a representation of her who had such a reputation for beauty? An artist depicts the building of Solomon's temple, which was to be the replacement for the tent that housed the ark. It's nearly 250 years since the original tabernacle was carried through the wilderness. Certainly many tents were the home for the ark in the intervening years. Perhaps at cult site, such as Shiloh, some kind of temple building housed the ark, but now a great temple was to be built to honor Yahweh. It was to be constructed without any noisy sounds of quarrying and hammering, by doing all the cutting at the quarry. Here we have a cutaway picture of the Temple of Solomon. It was 180 feet long, 90 feet wide, 50 feet high. Inside it was similar to the interior of the tabernacle, only grander, with an outer court and the mysterious and accessible only to the high priest, Holy of Holies, where the ark was guarded by golden cherubim. For 400 years, on a hill overlooking the city, the Temple of Solomon stood on the old threshing floor of Araunah, which David bought when the angel turned back the pestilence. Also thought to be Mount Moriah, where Abraham brought Isaac to sacrifice. The interior walls were of cedar 10 feet thick, carvings of ivory, gold, and wood, huge cherubims to guard the ark, of olive wood covered with gold. Animals were sacrificed outside on a large altar, with the cleansing rituals taking place in a bronze sea held on the backs of 12 bronze oxen in the courtyard. A small 8th century ivory pomegranate, a finial from some fixture in Solomon's temple, is one piece and perhaps the only one in existence. The inscription seems to read, "Belonging to the temple of the Lord, YHWH, holy to priests." Incense burners that date from Solomon's time were found at Arat in the Negev. Solomon was a great builder, even beyond Jerusalem, restoring and enhancing many of the cities of Israel. His form of construction included city gates of a particular kind. Here is the excavation of the Solomonic gates at Gezer, one of Solomon's royal cities. When walls of cities were reconstructed during his reign, they too are distinctive. Here is the offset inset Solomonic wall at the Arat fort, which have been restored in modern times. We look again at a previous picture, for the artist here pictures Jerusalem in its time of glory. The Temple of Solomon overlooks the city of David, surrounded by a protective wall, and shows the irrigation system that flowed out from the base of the hill to water the gardens there. This view is from the southeast, looking northwest, with Mount of Olives just beneath us. The time of David and Solomon are high points in the Jewish memory to this day, and that Jerusalem became the sign and symbol for their godly community in which God is the center in the temple, where God has chosen to dwell in their midst. The picture was Jerusalem as a mother, provided for by God, her husband, nourishing her children with the milk of her comfort, as in Isaiah 66. From this meaning and conforming to it, Christians regard the church as the New Jerusalem and transpose all the promises given to Jerusalem as promises to the Church of Christ, our mother, who feeds us with the food from heaven. The picture acknowledgments for this segment of our video programs: Reader's Digest, Great People of the Bible; National Geographic Magazine, Robert Cross, Biblical Archaeology Review; Holy Views Incorporated, the Illustrated Bible Dictionary; Reader's Digest Atlas of the Bible, Illustrated Bible Dictionary, The Bible as History in Pictures, and Rembrandt's Paintings.